Everybody knows all guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 are brought to us by the official beer of the program. Of course, we're talking Johnny Cuba, European roots with that Caribbean soul. You can pick up a Johnny Cuba, your local Sedano's, Presidente, Winn-Dixie, Fresco y Mas. If you don't know where to pick up a Johnny Cuba, you send me a message. My man Juan from Johnny Cuba, he'll tell me exactly where to tell you what's closest in your neighborhood. Of course, always remember when you're drinking Johnny Cuba, drink responsibly. And don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. And joining us here is our pal Seth Levit, who, of course, co-hosts the Fish Tank podcast with OJ McDuffie, all-time great Dolphin wide receiver. Everybody knows that. You'll hear Seth once again, another season of Dolphins football with OJ, with Travis Wingfield in the post-game show for Miami Dolphins football as well. That's now on iHeart moving forward. Seth, I wanted to make sure I got you. I wanted to get you on the show today for two reasons. All right. Number one, okay, I want to talk some Dolphins football, of course, because, you know, now we're less than a week away from we're in a game week now. All right. Dolphins have a preseason game next week. Obviously, we had the football last night. So I want to talk to you about Dolphins football, but I especially want to talk to you about Zach Thomas going into the Hall of Fame tomorrow. And for folks who don't know, you know, while Seth has crossed over the line, if you will, where he's now
the dark side.
Yeah, well, he's a talker now, and he's been a talker for years now. Seth was on the Dolphins PR staff for many years, and you were on the Dolphins PR staff when Zach Thomas was playing for the Dolphins. So yeah, I'm sure you got some really great insights, and I'm sure from a personal level, you're probably really excited for Zach Thomas tomorrow.
Oh, I am. I like to joke, you know, I was part of that class of 96 because I was an intern the year we drafted Zach. And so, you know, Zach, Sean Wooden, we love to joke about that. You know, Daryl Gardner was the first round pick that year. Quite a class, Jimmy Johnson's first class. So a lot of great memories. I was there for 8 seasons with Zach, the first 8 seasons of his career. So just an honor to be a part of that ride with a Hall of Fame player. Obviously an honor to be a part of Jason Taylor's journey as well. Just really great time to work for that organization. So yeah, this is special, man. He is Zach paid his dues. He played at the highest of levels. Obviously you don't get to go to the Hall of Fame if that's not the case. But it's been a long time coming, and I think there's going to be a lot of tears shed, mostly by Zach, but I think it'll be emotional for all of us.
I feel like, do you agree that Jimmy is such an obvious choice to be the guy that's inducting him?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if a family member would be the only other person that could make any kind of sense, but yeah, it's got to be Jimmy. I mean, it was the perfect fit. It was, you know, Jimmy made all of those incredible personnel moves in Dallas, won championships there. Unfortunately, that didn't happen here. Obviously, we know he recruited incredible players and built an unbelievable roster at the University of Miami. But when you start to talk about the team that he built here with the Dolphins, there were a lot of great players. But the first truly great player he selected in 1996, and that was Zach Thomas with the 154th pick.
What was it like working with Zach? And especially what I mean by that is because, like I said, for our listeners now, Seth was on the PR staff. I mean, his first year you were an intern, but then eventually, you know, you're on the PR staff. And so Zach, from everything that I remember, especially after losses, he was difficult because he cared so much. Right. You were getting a very emotional reaction from him after games. What was it like dealing with him on a game-to-game basis?
Well, I mean, true professional, right? It was great, but it was that emotional roller coaster. You know, he likes to use the word abuse. He would take a little bit of abuse. He'd give me a hard time, but he was always going to do the right thing. He just had to make us earn it, so to speak. But I love to tell the story. I got there as an intern in 1996. My boss was the legendary Harvey Green, you know, the head of the PR department. And we had a gentleman who was the number 2 guy that year by the name of Mike Hansen, who, may he rest in peace, after 1 year went to the Florida Panthers. And then he was in the NBA for a while. And Neil Golkis came in and filled that role. But that first year when I got there, like my first day on the job, Harvey, in only the way that Harvey can deliver a message, was like, all right, this is how it's going to work. I'm the PR guy for Danny and Jimmy, right? Marino and Jimmy Johnson. I'm the PR guy for Danny and Jimmy. Mike Hansen's the PR guy for the other starters. And whatever else is left, that's going to be yours. Whatever else is left. So a 5'10" linebacker out of Texas Tech who's drafted in the 5th round. That's whatever else was left, right? That guy, he was my guy. Larry Izzo was my guy. Up until the point where they cut Jack Del Rio, Zach gets named the starter. He knocks the hell out of Sean Jefferson, and now he becomes a Dolphins legend almost instantly. And he then became elevated to a Harvey guy, let alone just being my guy. But we had built that friendship, that bond. Anybody who understands the way sports work from the inside of an organization, it's usually the younger staff members that build these close bonds with the players because they're going through life at the same time. You know, Zach and I are the same age. We graduated high school the same year. You know, what was ever going on in pop culture, music, so on and so forth. So we saw life through a similar lens up until a point. His job was a little bit cooler than mine. But, so for those reasons, we did build a bond and we were able to do a lot of really fun stuff together, both on the field and off. And so I got to work with him after all of those games. What was nice was you knew that Zach and JT were going to be last, and not just last, but dead last in terms of what players were going to speak in a post-game locker room. Like they would wait almost an hour till people cleared out, till they could cool down, till the parking lot could thin out, because it was an appearance for them. It was almost like an autograph appearance every time they went out to the parking lot where all the families were there. And because it took so long, Harvey would eventually go back upstairs to the press box to get to working, and I would watch the end of the the open locker room, and that's when Zach and JT would come out. So I got to do that with him every time. He was going to be emotional. He was going to unload. It wasn't going to be filtered. I remember after a Jets loss one time in their stadium, he was just going on and on and on. And Dan Levitard turns to me and goes, "This is like therapy session for him." I said, "Yeah, he needs it. So thank you." But that's just who he was. And it's what made him a relatable player for fans. It's what made him an amazing teammate, because guys knew how passionate he was, how much he cared. And I think it translated to what you saw on the field.
So I had been on this case for years now about Zach getting into the Hall of Fame.
Sure, and you're not alone.
Well, and full disclosure, I would always say that my general stance was I think he's borderline. I don't know if he's going to get in. I don't know if he should get in. And look, the part that really started to make me angry when I then turned over where it's like, this is bullshit. He needs to be in the Hall of Fame. He's absolutely Hall of Famer, was when Urlacher got in first ballot.
First ballot.
If Urlacher, Seth, when Urlacher got in first ballot, then like the lights switched for me, and I'm like, all right, I'm not even being biased now when I say Zach Thomas is a Hall of Famer. He doesn't have to be first ballot, but for Urlacher to get first ballot and Zach can't even sniff a Hall of Fame finalist, there's something wrong here. That's when I started to get really upset about the whole process. What did you make of that once Urlacher got in, especially first ballot? Because you put their numbers side by side, and the only difference to me, yes, Urlacher won a defensive MVP, and that's not a small thing. I get it, all right?
And his team made it to a Super Bowl as well.
That's right. Sure. But everything else, when we're looking at all the numbers and we're looking at their play, they're either the same or Zach's are better.
Yeah, I agree. And you're talking about similar eras. It's not like you're comparing one guy from 3 decades prior to the other and trying to compare numbers. It really was apples to apples in a lot of ways. And quite frankly, and this could be sacrilege, but if you think about the AFC during the period of time that Zach played, it was Ray Lewis and Zach Thomas. And you could throw some other guys that had good years in there, but it was Ray Lewis and Zach Thomas. They were the cream of the crop. That's pretty good company. That's pretty good company. And, when your contemporary is arguably the greatest middle linebacker of all time, I think that, that speaks for itself. But you're right. When Urlacher went in, and I honestly, in some ways, while it may have angered Dolphins fans or people who just were, trying to be fair, I also think it did heighten the awareness of the selectors to say, well, you know what? This is an opportunity to try and get this right. I don't have a problem with the process. I think sometimes certain guys, for whatever reason, aren't viewed in a way. I feel that way about Mark Clayton. I don't know what in the hell happened with Mark Clayton, and I won't turn this thing into another argument about, who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. But it just happens with certain guys, not just with Miami Dolphins players, although Dolphin fans like to think that it's only the Dolphin players who are getting, slighted here. But they just either they don't look the part, or there's this perception of what guys should be and what they should look like. And I know that sounds silly, but I mean, it really does carry over into the pros. And sometimes guys come in with a name, a reputation, good marketing, playing in the right city, and those things carry, and they're good players, right? They're good players. We're not just saying that Urlacher was just, some figment of a marketing, manager's imagination. He was an elite all-time great, but Zach was every bit as good of a linebacker as Brian Urlacher was. There were certain flash plays that Urlacher could make that Zach maybe didn't, but then there's things that Zach did that Brian Urlacher didn't do, and Brian Urlacher would be the first guy to tell you that. So while it was aggravating at the time, I do think it ended up serving Zach well, because part of what you need to do is be compared to the guys who are in there. And if you start to compare and you start to match up with the guys that are in there, then the selectors have a hard time denying that.
Yeah, that's a good point. What I know you're flying out today.
Yeah.
What do you think? What's the contingent going to look like? I feel like when the Dolphins have had a guy, that being Jason Taylor, that being Dan Marino, when they've had one of the feature guys being inducted into the Hall of Fame, I feel like the Dolphin fan has represented very well in Canton. So what do we think it's going to look like there tomorrow? And who do you know as far as his teammates that are going to be there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a sea of aqua and orange. There's no doubt. You're right. This fan base is so loyal, particularly to the players you're talking about. And they travel, they go and support their teams. Look, the Dolphins fan base extends worldwide. The 72 Dolphins made sure of that. They made sure that there are people that became lifelong Dolphin fans. And then as different eras started to come and go, we didn't get the Super Bowls that they were getting in the 70s. You start looking at Zach Thomas and Jason Taylor. I mean, they carried this franchise and its fan base for a long, long time. And Zach he's a relatable guy. He's every man. People look at Zach Thomas, and sometimes I think they look at JT and he looks a little bit more like a superhero than he does, someone that you can relate to. But you see Zach, and if you play Pop Warner football and you remember, you've got a trophy still from the day that you had 16 tackles for, the Mighty Mites or whatever team, I could have been that guy if I had only done this and that. You kind of see yourself in Zach. And then he's so humble. And he comes, he's got that Southern gentleman-like personality and all of those things. And so not only was he a great player, not only was he one of the faces of this franchise for a decade plus, but he's just a good dude and people see themselves in him. And so, yeah, I think that it's going to be a huge group. I'm already seeing it. Dolphins Twitter is blowing up. There's people who are already there. They're having their own meetups that they're going to get together and organize and then go out there. I think at the Hall of Fame game, you go to a Dolphins game and you have the different people in different corners and they all get excited. There were groups of fans with signs saying, we're Zach Thomas fans. Miami fans love Zach Thomas, all of these things at the Hall of Fame game with the Jets and the Browns playing. Yeah. So they're up there. They're going to be pumped. They're going to be excited. I can't wait to see it. And yes, there's going to be a lot of Zach's former teammates that are going to be up there. I heard Channing Crowder talking about it on the radio the other day and how much he means to him. It's talked about nobody meant more to his career than Zach did. So people not only want to support him, but they feel so connected to him. I'm not trying to pull name dropper here, but I got a text yesterday. I was in the middle of doing something and there was like 7 people on the text, and Larry Izzo sent a group text out. And he said, all right, guys, we want to make sure everybody knows where to go and who's coming in and what time. And it was Izzo, Alindo Mari, Damon Huer, Jed Weaver, Todd Wade, Hunter Goodwin. These guys were all on this text, and they're all going out there. I know Trace Armstrong's going to be out there. Timbo's probably already there. It's going to be a great group of people. I'm excited just to kind of go see all the guys and reconnect with people before we go watch Zach cry his face off.
He's a lock to cry, right? I mean, he's
crying right now.
Well, yeah, he already said to everybody, he warned everyone, I'm not trying to be rude if I'm up there and I'm looking at your toes. If I'm looking at your feet,
right? Yeah.
So he knows
we're going to kill him on that. Yeah, I mean, he's crying right now. There's no doubt. He did a little sideline interview at the game last night, and he started to break down thinking about it. He was an emotional and passionate player when he played. Not a crier necessarily, but he just lived and breathed it. And then, as we tend to do as we get a little older, we get a little softer, we get a little more emotional. I remember when he went into the honor roll, when he and JT went in the same day, and he wore dark sunglasses, not only because it was sunny out, but he was crying there. He's got no shot to get up there in the most sacred of all football homes, and knowing that he's going to be there forever. Seeing the busts of, I know seeing Junior Seau's bust was something that hit him really deeply and hard, and it means a lot to him. The game has always meant a lot to him, and so for him to reach the pinnacle, it's going to all come out, man. And I guarantee he's crying right now. He's sitting somewhere. And he's asking the rest of the pass him a Kleenex.
Has he told anyone? I mean, maybe this is out there and I don't know about it. Like, what was it like when he got the phone call? Where was he? Who was he with? And that whole deal.
Oh, yeah. Well, so go on YouTube. It wasn't a phone call. They surprised him. I'm surprised you haven't seen this, Az. You got to go on YouTube. It was as emotional as anything. So his whole family secretly flew in. His mother takes him out to lunch. Jimmy Johnson gets snuck into the house in the gold jacket, and Zach comes home whatever, and he goes walking upstairs, and as he gets to halfway up,
I remember
there's
now.
Jimmy there in the goal, and Zach, he can't breathe. He said he could barely breathe and get up the stairs, and all the emotion poured out. He had waited a long time. It means a lot to him. And once you saw that, I mean, how could you not just be excited for the guy?
I did see that. I remember him halfway up the steps.
Right.
And Jimmy's up at the top there. I have seen that.
I'm glad, because I was like, damn, Zaz, you've been hiding out in there. I know you're pumping podcasts out like crazy, but you got to come out a little bit, man.
That's really cool. That's so good.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear his speech tomorrow. I think, is he lined up first? Do I have that correct?
He's first.
It's awesome.
First. It is awesome.
It's
awesome for a lot of reasons. It's awesome because, look, if you're a Dolphins fan, but you don't want to hear all these other speeches, you're one and done, right? Top of the order there, which is great. I also told him, and I learned this watching JT went second when he spoke. And, look, these guys are competitors. You don't get to the Hall of Fame without being an uber competitor. And, if I'm the last guy, does that mean something and all that stuff? But the stadium's packed. Mm-hmm. Everybody's watching on TV. The stadium's absolutely packed. And as guys start to go and it's getting hot out there. And
first is a money spot. That's a money spot.
The stadium starts to thin out.
Yep.
The last guy, unless it's going to be whatever, when Tom Brady goes in or whatever it might be.
I remember waiting around for Marino. Like I wasn't there. I was watching on TV. It was a long wait, Seth.
But some people start to disappear.
Yep.
If they don't, they just start to disappear because they've got things to do. It's long, it's hot. The speeches were much longer back then. Yeah. So he's at the top of the order, man. I think it's great for him to be there. And for him, with all of the emotion and the buildup, for him to do it, I don't want to say get it out of the way, because it's a once in a lifetime spectacular moment that, only the 1% of the 1% ever get to appreciate and enjoy and experience. But he'll get to do it. He'll get to pour it all out. Then he just gets to sit back and be a Hall of Famer and enjoy the ride. And he and I did talk about that. And so he's excited for the opportunity to kick this thing off.
This year's Dolphin team, like I said, Seth and Travis Wingfield and OJ McDuffie, every post game on iHeartRadio. Dolphins beginning next week, preseason game. We're in a game week. All right. So it's Dolphins football, man. It's here. Dolphins and Falcons. The expectations this year are as high as when would you say was the last time?
I mean, they're as high, I don't know when to pick it, and some guys will pick that. And I feel like people go through that journey and that ride, and everybody's going to the Super Bowl at this time of the year, but the expectations are high, and they're reasonably high. This is a talented roster. They flashed some very special things last year. You can't help but be excited about what Mike McDaniel has brought to the organization as a whole and to the offense. And then you bring in a guy like Vic Fangio with the reputation that he has, knowing that there's a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball as well. So there's great reason to be excited about this Dolphins franchise, as all the guys will tell you. And, I know it sounds a little bit like PR speak, but they still got to go out and play. and they've got a very competitive schedule. To me, they're in the most competitive division of all of football in the AFC East. So you could be a really good football team and go in as the second wild card in this division, just because the talent is so deep. Yeah, there's a lot of reason to be excited.
The part that's wild to me about that AFC East, I think the Patriots are going to stink, but they are the Patriots. So let's say they don't finish last in the AFC East. So if that's the case, if the Patriots don't finish last in the AFC East, then that means one team, Dolphins, Bills, or Jets, all three of whom have Super Bowl aspirations this year.
Right.
That means a team with Super Bowl aspirations is going to finish last in the division. This is a very tough division.
It is incredibly tough. And I know he's been taking his hits, and people like to pile on Bill Belichick just because he had so much success for as long as he did. And yes, he hasn't been the same without Tom Brady. Who would be the same without Tom Brady? But this is an all-time great coach. He's going to find a way to get the best out of that football team. What the best is, I don't know. But to your point, Zaz, it's going to be incredibly competitive. We know what we expect here from the Dolphins. We know what the Bills have been. They've been the class of the division for the last couple of years. And then the Jets, they've loaded up, man, and I know there's a whole lot going on. It's a little bit of a circus.
I don't think it's going to go the way they think it's going to go.
I hope you're right. There's definitely the potential for the bottom to fall out. We've seen that before with teams that go on that kind of a ride. But you have to at least keep your eye on them. They seem to be very well coached. They had a ferocious defense last year. And they just, they didn't have it figured out at quarterback last year. Now they're bringing a guy, say what you will about him, whether you like him or hate him, and who knows how much he's got left, but he's pretty damn good.
Seth, finally here, the Fish Tank Podcast, Seth Levit, OJ McDuffie, your most recent episode. I recognize your guest. Your most recent, and you probably taught Dolphin fans a little something here, because I've said to fans several times, hey, Top Dollar in WWE, he's AJ Francis. He was a linebacker for the Dolphins for a couple years, right? And that's him? Yeah, he's in WWE now. So you guys had Top Dollar on the show this week, right?
Who hotter than Top Dollar's ass? That's what we need to know. Yeah, man, it was really cool. I got to know AJ briefly towards the end of his tenure here. It was here from 2013 to 2015 as a defensive tackle. He was an undrafted guy out of University of Maryland. No spectacular career, undrafted, dealt with some injuries, spent some time in the practice squad, and better than you would expect from an undrafted player. But we're not talking about him in Canton for sure. And then he was gone to a couple other teams, and 6 years in the league. I mean, that's a good career. It's a good run. But what he was probably remembered for most in South Florida was that he drove for Uber in the offseason.
Right,
that's what he meant. It wasn't because he had 6 sacks in the season or 10 sacks or whatever. It was because he drove for Uber. He even laughed about it on the show. How in the world was that the thing? Of all the things I've gone viral for in my life, how was that the thing? But that was a big deal. Uber was just coming into the fold here in South Florida. And here's this guy who's a professional football player, and he might pick you up on the corner of Oakland Park Boulevard and, whatever it might be. And then I didn't hear from him after that. I talked to him about our poetry program because he was into poetry. He was into rap music. And next thing I know, as you said, he's getting introduced into WWE. He's the ultimate heel. He's pissing off everybody in the crowd. He's hitting guys illegally when the ref's not looking. I mean, he plays the part really well, doing his music as he's also, out there wrestling and power slamming people. And I just reached out to him. Thankfully, his number was the same as it was back in 2015. He's like, man, I'll come on the show. I said, great. We'll set up just like you did. Can I send you a link? He goes, no. I'll be down. I want to come down and see Messi play. And the guy's so diverse and interesting. He came down to see Messi play, and then he wanted to see the new Dolphins facility. And he came into the studio and just gave a spectacular interview.
I know he's mentioned this before. He knows nothing about football. He doesn't follow. He is a lifelong wrestling fan. He was good at football. He doesn't I don't think he's up to date on anything NFL wise.
Yeah, I mean, I think he likes football. Occasionally he'll see stuff, but you're exactly right. He doesn't sit there and grind and watch it. He is very passionate about professional wrestling. He was, and not just because he wrestles now, but to your point, since he was an infant almost.
Yeah.
I mean, 2-3 years old, he was practicing moves with his dad when he was, and I didn't realize this now, probably laughed it off. But when he was in college, when he was here in Miami, he told everybody that his goal post football was to be a WWE superstar. That was always the goal. He had planned for it. He prepared for it. It's funny to hear him say that because that's what you hear professional football players say. I waited for this moment. I planned for it. I watched it. I practiced. You hear basketball players. I practiced making the last shot in the parking lot, and all that. And the 3-2-1. This guy prepared how he was going to say it, how he was going to handle interviews, how he was going to harass opponents and fans. He wanted to be a WWE superstar, and now he's living out his dream.
Seth, promote the Fish Tank podcast and everything you and OJ got going on. Go ahead.
Yeah, man, we like to have a good time. We're storytellers. If you can't tell from this interview, I like to run my mouth a little bit, but it's not an X's and O's podcast. We save that for if we do a Twitter space or certainly the post-game show. But if you dive into the Fish Tank, which you can find on all streaming platforms, you're a podcaster now yourself, Zaz, and it looks good on you. But, whatever, Apple, Spotify, Google, all of those things, you can go find us or on the Dolphins website. But we like to have guests in that played for the Dolphins, a lot of alumni, a lot of the legends. Everybody, Zach was just on recently. JT's been on. Larry Zonka's been on. You name it. They've been on the show. We like to laugh. We like to pull the curtain back a little bit and let people see what we talk about when there aren't others around, and just have a lot of fun.
Great job, Seth. Have fun this weekend. It's a really great moment for Zach, it's the best moment, but for the franchise, everybody who's involved, it's a long time coming. It's a really great weekend.
Yeah, thank you, Zaz. I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on. And again, welcome to this podcast space, man.
Thank you.
Congrats on everything you're doing with the 2.0 show.